Why do you start with character?
I think that character is really what engages anyone with a story. I think that when we watch a movie or a TV show or a short, we want to see a character. We want to connect with them, root for someone, engage with them, watch them arc and grow. And that's where a story should be built from that character. Yes, you can sometimes start with a premise, but until you find that character that is going to be the best one to tell that story with, you don't really have your idea ready. So for me, it's all about building that person, and they should be the ones making things happen, and it shouldn't be that things happen to them. So for me, character is the first building block of any story, and they should be the ones that you're telling everything from.
What advantages do writers have for those who start with characters versus those who start with plot?
I think that it depends sometimes on the genre. Sometimes when you're thinking of like an action movie, you tend to go more with plot than with the character at first. But again, in my opinion, it's always best to start with the character, because then you're mapping the emotions of the story. And that's what really connects the audience with your story. They're not just watching, the fallback from an earthquake. They're watching the character go through the fallback of an earthquake. You're watching someone go through those emotions, and you're either rooting for them or, wanting them to die by the end if they're evil, But that's really what is going to make or break your story, is the way we connect with them. That's why it's so important, the way you introduce the character, hopefully in action, and we immediately connect with them, and then we watch their journey. We want to watch them grow or change or be affected by the events of the story. So if it's things happening to them and they're just reacting, it's not as active. It's kind of passive and more boring for the audience. What we want is characters who make decisions. They might be the wrong ones, and that can sometimes be better because it's more exciting to watch them, suffer and have obstacles, or be their own obstacles. But it's much more interesting when they're making decisions to do something or not do something.
So even if, let's say, a writer's going to do a story about a specific time, okay, let's just say the Great Recession, 2008. Mm-hmm. If we look at some of the stories, The Big Short, Margin Call, they had characters that drove the story. It wasn't just... Yeah. You see like a headline of the Wall Street Journal or something, the market's tanking. We're seeing the characters be in that world, and different things are happening.
Yeah, that's the thing. For example, a classic that I'm assuming everyone's seen, Titanic. It's a story we've seen before, and we've read about it, and there have been stories before. We all know it. But we still love watching that because we're watching Kate Winslet and Leo DiCaprio have this amazing love story, right? And that's what we connect with. The story remains the same. The backdrop is the same. We still watch, the Titanic and the iceberg, and all of that happens. But what we're connecting with is their love story and their evolution. And Kate Winslet going from this princessy almost type, to falling for this guy that she would have never met had she not been there, and then giving everything up just because she was changed by having loved this man, even though it was only a couple of days, She changed the course of her life. And then we see at the very end, those pictures, she rode, horses and did things that she never thought she would do because she would not have had that life had she not met him. So it's all about those characters.
Why do you write bios for all of your characters?
I think that the bios for the characters really help the writer get to know their characters before they approach the page. A lot of those bios don't even make it to the page. So there's that thing where a lot of writers are like, why should I spend so much time working in a character bio if I'm not going to see that? Well, it's because that's what makes you think of characters as three-dimensional people with layers to themselves. If you think about, how they grew up, then maybe they speak in a certain way, or they have this kind of like past where, their dad left them when they were little. And maybe the story has nothing to do with that in the sense of like, it doesn't start with the dad leaving them and all of that, but there's always that thing in the character, as they're going about things, maybe The reason they have relationship issues is because of that backstory. So thinking of all of those pieces and writing the bios for your characters is really a way to flesh them out, get to know them. So when you're writing on the page, then they have unique personalities. They have a unique voice because of what happened in their past. They speak in a certain way. Maybe a person is really shy and they don't say enough because of something that you set up in that backstory, in that bio that you created. And that's what makes them a certain way. Or maybe they had so many incidents in their past that made them very jaded. So they're very jaded and witty in the way they speak, you know? For example, in Friends, you know, you have Chandler Bing, who just talks with kind of jokes all the time because he's deflecting. And he has a backstory that we get to know pieces of it throughout the show, you know, and it's not just exposed right away, but he had a history with his parents and a horrible divorce that happened during Thanksgiving and all of that, and cheating and all of that involved. But all of that backstory that they wrote for that character created his voice. That's the way he talks. And he talks like that because of that little boy that was created in that bio that had that backstory that he's always deflecting and trying to be the funny one so as not to think about maybe the reality of what was happening to him. So working on those bios helps you flesh them out and make those characters become real. And when you're analyzing a script, that's what you want, right? You want characters that feel realistic, that speak in a way that is natural and organic, and that they don't all sound the same. That's a critical thing I always see in scripts, you know, and a typical note I give is like, all of your characters sound like the same person. If I was reading them without reading the character name, I wouldn't know who's talking. So when you're thinking of your bio, think of even those things, you know, oh, they're jaded, so maybe they're always talking like this or saying things like that, that it's going to make them sound different. The way real people are, right? We don't all talk the same. I'm more like the chipper personality and I talk a lot. My husband is really quiet, you know, like we're a good match in that sense. And like I make him talk and then he's grumpier and I'm like this chipper. And we don't sound the same. But on the page, a lot of people just write all of them sounding like the exact same person. And no, we're different. So those bios help you create that and transfer that to the page.
The character bio, so much of it is really for that writer to have in their back pocket and just know who the person is and drive that story forward with all of these things.
Yes.
At what point do we say, you know what, we're putting too much of the bio in the story? We don't need our audience to know all of this.
I think it depends whether you're writing a feature or you're writing for television. It's very different the way you approach a character bio. So if you're talking about a feature, yes, a lot of times you don't need all of that. It can be layered and just be there for you as a writer. And you put little things here and there that just make them feel three-dimensional. You know, you don't need to mention all of the things that made them who they are. Just let some of those things like kind of slide in. If you're writing for television, on the other hand, the bio is essential because in the pilot, you're just teasing a few things, but everything that you've created is what's going to come out for seasons to come. So when you're writing those bios, that's where the show Bible really comes in because you're writing this huge document where hopefully if your show gets made, you know, your writing staff is sort of in your head by reading this Bible and knows everything you've thought about the show for seasons to come because you're writing the entire backstory, all of the siblings, all of the drama with their parents, everything that happened when they grew up, all of those little things that you're sort of setting up and then throughout the seasons we'll get to know. So perhaps in season 1, they mention having a sibling, you know, but we don't actually get to meet that sibling till years down the line, like it happened in Big Bang Theory with Sheldon. We meet the sister like way down the line. Then obviously we see the young Sheldon, you know, where the sister is part of the show. But in the original, we don't meet her till later. Or in the case of Friends, we always knew that Rachel had 2 sisters. We don't get to meet them till way down the line. But all of that was created in the bias of the characters. And we heard about them in the first couple of seasons, even if it took seasons to meet them. But that made that character someone, you know, we always knew, oh, she has these 2 sisters, you know, that created a dynamic in the family of who they were, and then we get to meet them. So it's different when you're thinking television versus features, I guess.
How does a character's flaw relate to the character's goal?
I think that they should be intimately connected in that their flaw should be a big obstacle to their goal. So if they want to achieve something in the end, whatever flaw they have should impede that. So for example, if a character needs by the end of the story, to deliver this big speech, like the King's Speech, literally that movie, his flaw is the stutter, right? And he needs to deliver a speech, literally. So they need to be connected, right? The goal is that, and then the flaw is impeding that. And what we're tracking throughout the story is exactly the evolution. He works with a speech therapist, right? That tries to get ahead, tries to tackle the root of his fear, the root of his stutter, and evolves in a way that then leads to that final goal. So those two should be intimately connected, and that's really what creates the arc of your protagonist. And what you're tracking, again, as we were talking before, all of the turning points of the story are about that, right? The inciting incident could be like, you need to deliver this speech, and then towards the end, it will be delivering it, which will be the climax, but all of the turning points should connect with it.